Hi friends, I'm Scott Giles, minister and hypnotist, and welcome to Power Talk, my video blog where I cover topics that interest me, focusing on how you can use the power of your mind to take control of your life. If you want to know more about my professional work or sign up for my free Substack newsletter, Power Lines, check out my website, which I'll tag in the description. If there is something in your life that you feel is out of control, using hypnosis can turn that around. Well, as most of you know, I am fascinated by the intersection of science and spirituality. And today I want to talk about a new wrinkle in that space, which is being called neurospirituality. That is, it has become possible to discover what areas of the brain are activated by spiritual exercises, and that those areas of the brain appear uniquely privileged in human physiology. That is, the brain is hardwired to lean into a belief in the existence of a higher power. Now, the key player in this emerging area of physiology is Michael Ferguson, who teaches at Harvard Medical School. He has now published several important studies in peer-reviewed medical journals, but his first and most important one was an article titled "Reward Salience and Attentional Networks Are Activated by Religious Experience in Devout Mormons," published in 2018 in the journal Social Neuroscience. What Ferguson did was to use an imaging technique called functional magnetic resonance imaging, functional MRI or fMRI. It's a kind of brain scan. He scanned the brains of 19 devoted members of the Church of Jesus Christ of the Latter-day Saints, formerly called the Mormons. The church is moving away from that title, although the Book of Mormon remains their basic scripture. He had them pray and imagine spiritual activities that they had taken part of as part of their temple endowment. Well, the fMRI showed unique patterns of blood flow to areas of the brain that do not otherwise routinely occur during other non-spiritual activities. The blood flow showed increased activity in the periductal area of the brain, which is one of the primordial areas of the brain, joining the brainstem with the limbic system at midbrain. This is an area of the brain that is really quite primitive as the areas in the brain that control breathing, circulation, and basic metabolic functions. So it's something that evolved early in human evolution, and it's a structure, a physical clump of nerve cells that you could observe, not something that is merely hypothetical. Now, there are certainly limitations with this study, the major one being the small sample size. Functional MRI scans are expensive, and research grants regarding spiritual things are few and hard to come by. Therefore, we can assume it will be some time before we see confirming or challenging studies, and we have to regard Dr. Ferguson's work as preliminary and suggestive, not proof of anything. But it's suggestive as heck. Spirituality may not in fact be a cultural construct as sociologists have been teaching for decades. It may in fact have a biological basis. In fact, according to the best evidence we have in hand, it does have a biological basis. Now, when I've shared this research with some colleagues, they immediately leapt to the conclusion that the existence of spiritual hardwiring in the brain implies the existence of a supernatural hardwirer, that is, a god of some sort. But this is mistaken. To see that it is mistaken, reflect that there are whole communities that engage in spiritual activities but do not believe in a higher power. For example, mainstream Buddhism. Buddha is not considered a god, he was a teacher. There is no supernatural teachings in actual Buddhism. Things like reincarnation and similar beliefs were grafted onto Buddhist practice long after the death of the historical Buddha and originated typically in other belief systems that were cultural in the area, such as Japanese Taoism or Tibetan Bon. Buddhism is at baseline an atheistic religion. In fact, some argue that it is really more of a system of psychology than a religion as we think of such things in the West. Yet, we can predict from what the Mormons were doing that Buddhists would probably have a similar activation of that part of the brain when they engage in the spiritual activities that are typical of Buddhism, even though they don't require the existence of a higher power. You see, the principle of evolution only requires that something be useful in order to evolve. Therefore, what we can say is that it appears that spiritual practices and beliefs bestow evolutionary advantages. That is, they help a person survive and reproduce. And it's not hard to imagine what those evolutionary advantages might be. Spirituality and religion of any sort tends to bring people together into social structures. That encourages pair bonding, interpersonal support, pack behavior, and so on. It likely also allows one to find a level of comfort when dealing with the inevitable reversals and hardships of life by, for example, providing techniques of emotional self-regulation, such as prayer, affirmation, or meditation. It's those things that confer the evolutionary advantage. People who have the emotional and even physical support of other people will do better at the great game of life than those who do not. Therefore, structures in the brain that encourage people to support each other, to live according to understood rules of the tribe or pack, that bestow an advantage in pair bonding because it helps you meet people, that provides comfort so you don't become depressed and non-functional. Those things will evolve for the reason they provide an evolutionary advantage, not because there's a God who designed people that way. But this cuts both ways. While the existence of neurospirituality does not provide evidence for the existence of a God or a higher power, because the neurospiritual networks in the brain could have evolved for reasons that have nothing to do with the existence of a God or a higher power, it doesn't contradict that either. One can look at the data and say, this suggests the human brain was designed by a higher power that installed spirituality into the brain at baseline. That is a reasonable case, given the current state of our knowledge, but the opposite is also true. We don't need the belief in a higher power to explain the evolution of these brain structures either. But, and this is what interests me, neurospirituality does tell us that each and every one of us has the capacity in our brain that allows us to maximize our evolutionary advantage, even if you're an atheist, by engaging in things like meditation, contemplation, affirmation, group activities with other people around philosophical, spiritual topics, and other things that may exploit the wiring in the brain that neurospirituality points out. That wiring will encourage us to seek out like-minded people. That will encourage us to form support networks. It will encourage us to develop methods for self-soothing and self-encouragement. It doesn't matter if we call those techniques religious or spiritual practice, or psychological therapy, or mind control, or anything else. Evolution has given us a predisposition to enact things that bond us to the world we live in and to each other. Even if we do not believe in a god or gods, we can believe in spiritual activities as a true magic. That magic is the ability to live more effectively and abundantly. Hey, thank you for your time and attention today. I'll be back next week with another talk on a different subject, and I'd like to invite you to join me. If you're watching this on my YouTube channel, it helps me a lot if you tell others about my videos, so please like, share, and subscribe, and hit the notification bell. You are welcome to subscribe to my Substack using the buttons you will find on this post or on my website. And of course, if you're wondering if I can be of help to you, consider attending one of our online classes or working directly with me. Feel free to reach out through my website for a free, no-obligation meet and greet call, and we'll talk about it. Have a great week.